Christianity is actually about using your mind. Now, over the years, I can see why agnostics and atheists and skeptics actually look into Christians and go, oh, you don't use your minds. Because Christians have kind of done a really good job at making Christianity just about sentimentalism. All right, it's just like how I feel and my emotions, and it's not really, people who think. That tends to be it's like we love I was reading this worship song recently. I won't mention which one it is because I don't want any emails, but it was talking about how God, looks at me and he dances with me and he dips me. And it's kind of like, look, God is not your boyfriend who takes you to the prom. That's not what Christianity is about. Here, Peter's going, preparing your minds. You got to think. Now, if you're an agnostic and you're an atheist and you're a skeptic and you think, no, I'm smart, ergo, I'm not a Christian, or ergo, I don't believe in God. That's actually the opposite. Now, here's what I mean, the opposite of reality. Here's what I mean. I had a lot of friends growing up that didn't believe in God, and I didn't believe in God growing up, no Bible, no church, or anything. But they believed in morality. And so they would say, so maybe you're someone who says you don't believe in God, and you like to use your mind versus faith, and that's kind of the dichotomy you've created. But the reality is this. For instance, do you believe racism is wrong? Probably. You probably believe intolerance is wrong. But the question is, where did you actually get that premise? So you might believe racism's wrong, but you think that sexually you can kind of do whatever you want. Now, here's the problem with that. From a logical standpoint, if we want to use our minds, based on what do you make that distinction? About I can do sexually this, but racism is this, or torture is wrong all the time. But who told you that? Now, when I was an atheist, I'd say, well, just everybody knows that racism is wrong. But that's not actually a good philosophical reason to believe it, because there's lots of cultures who would believe, hey, this race is bad, let's put them in a gas chamber. You don't want to define your morality by popular vote. There's lots of people who believed in slavery in the past. You need actually something else, some firm foundation to believe in moral structures and believe one thing and the other. So I would say that believing in God, believing in Christianity is not the leap of faith. The leap of faith is saying, I believe racism is wrong, but I have no foundation to believe it. I have no reason to believe that human beings are different than rocks. There is no meaning of life ultimately. There is just this cold vastness, and yet I have a moral compass. Based on what distinction do you do this? And so the Bible comes along and goes, well, there are distinctions. In Romans chapter 10, Paul's writing to these Christians, and this is a good word for Christians now. He says, in Romans 10, he says, for I bear them witness that they have zeal, which is nice, but without knowledge. So he's saying there's a whole bunch of Christians that are zealous, all right? They're hot, but there's no light. Meaning they're just not thinking. And so what he's saying is you got to prepare your minds. Christianity is not just about emotions. We planted a church to reach people who think, because we believe that Christianity is the best idea in the marketplace of ideas, and that actually makes sense. Now, there's lots of people who go, yeah, but I'm a rational person, and there's faith over here, and there's rational people over here. Years ago, one writer that I read made a very good analogy about this. And he said this. He said, if you had to go to the doctor and you said, I got to go to this doctor and I got to make sure that this doctor is really good at the surgery that I need. And you went and researched her and you talked to all your friends and yep, she's a great doctor, okay. And you did all the research, you did all the rational thinking you could. And it brought you to the day of the surgery, and you got to the hospital, and you're like, okay, I got to go to and then you're like, I don't know, and you banked out and you ran away. Why would you be doing that? Well, it's not because you're actually rationally thinking through it. See, in that moment, you've stopped being rational, and you've started trusting your emotions. You started trusting your gut. You started going, I'm not trusting the data. And that's what I think happens when people don't believe in God. I don't think the leap of faith is actually believing in God. I think it's not believing in God. And this is what Peter's saying. He says you got to use your mind. And if the evidence shows you that it actually makes sense of morality, it makes sense of the structure, then what's the reason you're running away? It's not based on the data. It's because your gut, it's the thing behind the thing. It's you don't want someone to rule you, or you don't want someone to tell you about this sexuality or money or whatever. And the reality is, Peter's saying, it's important for us to follow our minds in all things. That it's unbelief that is the thing that is the absence of thinking.